All right, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Deaf Women's Herstory Month virtual event. Convo really believes in uplifting the deaf ecosystem and recognizing the importance and the awareness of every month. And this month is Women's History Month, but actually in our community, and it's been formally recognized, it's Deaf Women's Herstory Month. And because of that, we really are absolutely thrilled to partner with two wonderful organizations that we really look up to, Deaf Women of Color, DWC, and Deaf Women United, DWU, to host this panel and really bring in and discuss different living experiences. And this year's International Deaf Women's theme is post-COVID and what that actually looks like. So I'm looking forward to really getting to hear from all the panelists. I'm honored to have Arlene Ngalle. I have known Arlene for a long time, and she's been a big supporter and giving a lot in this community, and has had many years of ERS experience, and also was involved in the sign for Kamala Harris and inventing the sign for that. And I couldn't think of a better person to lead this other than Arlene. I'm very honored to have Arlene lead this. This is all yours, Arlene.
It really is an honor, and it's exciting to be here with you as your moderator today. First, I would like to introduce our panelists. These are deaf women as well. First, we have Alicia Wooten. She hails from Denver. She was actually from Texas, so now she's living in DMV. She was a student at Gallaudet, and as a student in Gallaudet, she has studied immunology, biology. She has done research with HIV, a lot of communicable diseases, and the causes for pneumonia. Growing up, she was in an oral school until she was 15 and was exposed to sign and met several friends. So here we have Alicia.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here.
Thank you, Alicia. Now our next panelist is Brittany Beeman. Her name sign is Brittany. She hails from Tennessee, and she's currently living in Ohio. And she's a licensed practicing nurse, an LPN. She also attended Gallaudet and studied biology, as well as an athlete in basketball. So she is an amazing basketball player. What a champ.
Oh, thank you. You're an amazing teammate as well.
So right prior to the COVID pandemic, being a licensed practitioner nurse, your studies must have greatly impacted your work. So you have experience in sports medicine, nutritional care, OBGYN, and also is supporting a social media platform called DeafMed. Her goal is to have that platform to share awareness and inspire the deaf community.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Brittany. Our next panelist is Ivy Valeskus, and she is from Massachusetts. Her parents are deaf, who immigrated from Puerto Rico, and she is very proud Puerto Rican pride and a lot of support in the Latina community. She's working at a statewide corporation called DDS, the Department of Developmental Services, and has been working for 35 years in human services. So a lot of development and experience in consultation, different practices, and has a focus on cultural sensitivity and diversity, ASL linguistics in schools and workspaces. She gives presentations and workshops in relation to the issues of the deaf in the employment industry.
Thank you. I'm absolutely excited to be here.
And now for our next panelist, Myra Castrejon.
Mm.
You're now currently living in Wisconsin, but actually born in Mexico. She grew up in Wisconsin with a very strong Mexican culture at home. So having the experience of two different cultures as a Mexican American and also in America. Growing up, she did lose her hearing and attended the Wisconsin School for the Deaf. She has sisters and brothers who are also deaf, and she is now currently the president of Deaf Women of Color. She teaches ASL.
Mm.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited.
Next, Rosavetta, and she is from Georgia. She is an 8th generation deaf woman of multiracial culture. She's traveled throughout Florida working as an interpreter, and she is the first Black deaf woman to be directed as the director. She currently is working at DWU in the outreach department.
Thank you. I appreciate being here with everybody.
Great. So now I'm excited having everyone here, these experts and deaf women. I'd like to ask you a few questions to the panel, and maybe you could take turns answering. Now, when I do ask a question, we will have myself on screen, and then we will have 2 other screens so that we will be able to transfer back and forth. If you'd like, you could ask questions through the Q&A chat, and we'll be able to share those questions with the panelists. All right, are we ready for our first panelist question? So your identity as a deaf woman and your other identities as well, are they equivalent to your experience as a deaf woman in deaf culture, and why? Rosavetta, would you like to answer that?
Yes, so I identify myself not only as a woman and deaf, but also my racial background, multi-racial. I'm Black, Latina, Mexican, and also Native American as well. So I feel like there's so many different people, and then you put them all together, and that's what I am. I have so many different cultural contexts that are part of me, and it's really important to me. And it's a lot to do with what I believe in, what I pursue, what I do in my daily life. And so I really identify as all of those.
Great, and I'm curious, your experience, as you identified, have you had any struggles with your identity?
Yes, my identity gets questioned often. I often border the fence of who I actually was as a person. And it took me years to accept myself as every single piece of my identity. And I heard growing up that I wasn't never enough, not Black enough, not Mexican enough, not Native American enough, not enough. And that was ingrained into me growing up. And then as I got older, I decided that it is up to me to really reclaim my identity, and this is who I am, period.
So you had mentioned you yourself are biracial, and I'm wondering the representation and the likeness, were you able to find that growing up throughout your family?
So honestly, it was very tough. Rosalie Timms was the very first person for me to really look up to. We had very similar backgrounds, similar hair, similar things like that. And as time went on, I tried so hard to fit in, and I really didn't identify as a multiracial person, but I identified as deaf. And so oftentimes I had Latin and Black backgrounds intersect with each other. But currently, with my leadership role, I'm really able to expose many multiracial children to explain to them that they are enough. You take all of these parts of you and you are enough.
Well, I have a deaf son who is also biracial, and what sort of exposure am I able to give to him? And I've been able to learn more about the biracial identity. So thank you, Rosavetta, for sharing.
Thank you.
Alicia.
Sure. So everything that Rosavetta mentioned is absolutely spot on for me. I am biracial. Have a Japanese mother, a white father. I have very similar experiences as Rosavetta. I grew up feeling conflicted on who I am. I'm not quite Japanese. I'm not Asian. I'm not white. And people would look at me typically and say, "Well, you're not Asian, but you're not white. So who are you?" And it was a lot of mixed feelings about being mixed. And so it actually took a very long time for me to step back and say, wait a second. Yes, my genetics say 50-50, but I am 100% of both. And I think that with everything that's happening this year and last year, I really had to unpack and analyze myself and figure out what are my boundaries? What are my responsibilities as a person of color, but also as a white person? And so that has really been a big learning curve for me. Everything that Rosavetta mentioned absolutely matches my sentiments. I grew up with a mother who moved from Japan in her 20s. So her culture was definitely part of me.
Mhm.
And that is a very big part of what made me say, yes, I am Japanese American and I am a woman.
Wow, I'm curious. Do you have any role models that are identical to your identity that you had growing up?
So no, my biggest role model was Lucy Liu,
Hmm.
the actress. She's the only Asian person I saw on screen that I thought, oh my gosh, she looks similar to me. But there were no deaf role models. It was very limited growing up.
That's tough. So, as far as valuing your different identities, how about on the whole?
So I'm from South Texas, and I would say about last year I finally embraced it. I kept telling people I am half Japanese, half white, and people would say, "No, no, no, you're Mexican," and I would get a lot of, "No, you're not. You're not that." Or I would explain that I'm Asian, and they'd say, "Oh, I can see it in your eyes when you smile," and I didn't like that.
Wow. Well, I hope young women out there who have the same identity are inspired by your story. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Next, we have Myra.
Yes, hello. I am from Guadalajara, Mexico, and I identify as a Mexican. I was not born in the United States. I moved here and I was labeled Latina. When you're in Mexico, you say, "Oh, I'm from Guadalajara and I'm from this area," but we don't have the label of Latinas. And so when I came here, I had a hard time being labeled Latin. And there was no labels on where exactly I was from. It was like, "Oh, you're from Mexico." Well, I'm from Guadalajara. And my mother explained to me that you be proud of who you are as a Mexican. And many people just accepted that, okay, you're a Latina. And they would tell me I'm a Latina and I would say that. But inside of me, I am a Mexican.
So, your struggles with the stereotype of being labeled Latina, and your parents actually being from Mexico. There is a deaf group, there is a deaf community in Mexico and throughout the different cities, or how how were you able to find your community?
So there's many people who maybe are
I'm
from
sorry,
like, oh, they're
Chicanx?
and they don't understand my culture because I have a lot of cultures and traditions that are from Mexican, whereas Chicanx is different. It's a blend, and they can rebel. I can't. We have to be very respectful of our parents, help our mother cook. That's the type of background that we grew up in. And I'm hard of hearing, so I could speak, but in the house, I had to speak in Spanish. And so I have a sister as well who's deaf. And so we have similar feelings in this, but there's very few of us, very few people that I have met from Mexico in Milwaukee, which is where I live. There's not many Latinas here, and it is very hard. This is a majority white area, which is why I understand why my mother taught me to embrace who I am, to never forget my traditions, my values. And I still do. I teach my niece that I know that she is from America, but I teach her the Mexican culture, and it's her choice whether she wants to embrace it or not. But the roots of us are from Mexico.
That's the key, your roots. You always have to value and cherish your family's roots and history, generations, the things we share throughout traditions. It's such a blessing.
Yes.
Next, we have Brittany.
Yes, hi. I grew up identifying myself as hard of hearing. There was no deaf culture in my town. I was actually the only deaf or hard of hearing there. But I didn't know much out of the box. As hard of hearing, I could hear with my hearing aid. I did not know any signs. And then I went to Gallaudet University and learned signs there. And I realized that I found what I was missing, and I was able to analyze myself and find my true identity of labeling myself as deaf. My issue currently working in the healthcare system is that when I mention that I am deaf to my patients, they all kind of pause and stutter, and they don't know what to do to me, do or say with me. And if I explain that I am hard of hearing, they relate to it better because they think that hard of hearing kind of means that you're losing your hearing and you're like an older person is. And so I think that that's something that definitely needs to be changed in the healthcare system. And to my patients, I don't know why, but I say that I am hard of hearing. I want to say that I am deaf, but the reaction and the perception that I get from my patients is very different. And I know that I need to be brave enough to say that I am deaf, but at the same time, I don't want to lose my patients' trust and confidence in them. So I identify as a deaf woman, but it is a very sticky situation and it can be really tough.
So you're one of the pioneers. There's not a lot of deaf or hard of hearing people in the nursing field. So I'm curious, as you went into Gallaudet and learned to sign, prior to that, how had you heard of Gallaudet? Did you know you were expected to learn sign? You know that in the university there would be many people signing. Were you able to find people with similar backgrounds?
So I actually had never heard of Gallaudet until my basketball coach. Someone reached out to my coach and told them to look up Gallaudet University. And so I was recruited by them, and I also joined the USA basketball team. And at that time, I was absolutely clueless. I didn't know if they were talking about me, if they had the right person, but it was a blessing that my coach relayed this information over to me and told me about Gallaudet University. And I went over and visited, and I realized that there were so many more people like me. And I met the teammates, and I 100% just fell in love and knew that I had to go there, and I learned how to sign, and everything is history from there. I'm just so happy I went. And if I didn't go, I don't know where I would be. I don't know if I would be a nurse. I wouldn't be a role model for the deaf community in the medical field.
Wow. So a follow-up question, your experience in the workplace as a hard of hearing deaf nurse, do you feel that there is a benefit to mentoring?
So during school, it was required to have an interpreter. There's a lot of patients that were older who maybe mumble, and also those with Alzheimer don't speak very clear. They might whisper. And I definitely had a harder time during clinicals. But in my work area, everything is electronic. And so I typically will show via a computer, or I'll write it down. So everything is there. But if I need one in the future, I would definitely use an interpreter, and I can do that. So it really just depends where I'm at. I'm in a very small office, and so communication works well thus far, but I think it depends on the situation.
It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ivy.
Yes, hello. You talk about deaf identity as a deaf woman and then also everything else. Now, I've never had the issue with deaf because that's always been part of my identity. I come from a deaf family. And women as Latin culture from Puerto Rico, my grandmothers, my mother and father, all from Puerto Rico. I have a strong connection with that. But what I had a strong connection with was the deaf culture and the deaf community, and telling me that I had to pick whether I was deaf or I'm a deaf woman or I'm a woman who's deaf. And some situations, I feel like I want to identify first as my Latin culture. I'm a Latina deaf woman. And I can change based on the situation and the lives that what I have lived through. And so the deaf community has always said you have to pick what order you want to have that in. And society has decided that deaf goes first. And I've always said, I'm taking that back and I identify as who I would like to be. And I decide that if I want Latina first, if I want deaf first, if I want woman first, I can pick that. And that's how it goes. Um, a lot of a lot of conversations I would have, I would see some people say, "Oh, no, you should put deaf first," and that needs to stop.
So you had mentioned about changing the order of your identity. It seems for the biracial people of color community, it could be, the deaf, the heritage, and then the gender. Is that a specific choice that you make, or do you prefer race first because that's a visual of who I am?
Yes, let me answer that question. In my own kitchen, my daily kitchen, Spanish food and the culture is all right there. And that's my home base. And you'll have that identity at home, in the kitchen. What you're surrounded by is who you are. You can't just say, I look at you and I see that you seem to be more Japanese or more Latin or more. Your kitchen and what is mixed up and your flavor is who you are.
So what are some other identities that you
So
identify?
////. I am just Ivy Velez.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so for our next question, let's see, do any of the panelists have any questions? All right, so I'll proceed. So our next question, it's really difficult. Now, since coronavirus, how did it impact you personally, professionally, on those levels? Rosavetta?
Yes. Well, how do I frame this? When you're surfing a wave and you see everything, but you can't actually see how big the wave is. And it might be huge, but you're riding that wave. I felt like that's what COVID was. Once you fell off that surfboard and you turn around and you see that massive wave coming towards you, that massive wave is everyday occurrence, work, everyday situations, everything that all gets compiled. That wave fell right on top of us and it came crashing down when it came to social issues, COVID, worries and concerns. I felt super contained in one space. I was very restricted, and it actually forced me to open up and analyze myself, to analyze what do I do every day and the things that I do. And it was tough personally and professionally. Professionally, the workload, it compounded on me. I was an essential employee. And so I didn't have much time left for myself. I was just feeding into all of my professional and I didn't have much energy for anything else. What was left, I was drained. And so I depleted myself. But the positive part of that is that really started to cause me to analyze myself and figure out what I need to do to take care of myself in order to take care of others. And that was a rough journey all through 2020. But in an odd way, I'm very thankful for that happening. There was a lot of reasoning behind that. There was a lot of analyzing. And now I feel like I'm a new person and I know my limits. I know what I can do, how much I can give, and I know that I always have to come first as a priority. And that had a huge impact on me. And I'm sure that many other women have very similar sentiments as well.
Right, that is tough, and I myself went through the same experiences. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rosavetta. And next, Ivy.
I don't want to, I mean, what Rosavetta said was beautiful, but I also want to mention and add that as a health and human services provider, I felt very accountable for my deaf community. It is impossible to ever remove myself from that role. But I realized that I had to analyze myself and know that I am a deaf consumer in Massachusetts and I don't have any access to information. So what happens to all of my consumers and their families? And they've lost so much of information, and COVID outraged me. I realized I had no access to so many different things, but at the same time, as a service provider, I realized that I had access to certain things because of my contacts, but as a whole for the deaf community, there was a lack of communication. The states did not do a great job in disseminating information, and across the board, it was a huge impact. I felt like we were starting all over again, trying to get communication and information. We have made strides, and we had more programs set up and more access disseminated to us. Now, as a female vice president, we feel more inspired, and I feel like we can really move on from what had happened and look at the positives.
I can imagine, working in the human services field, seeing a huge barrier for the deaf community. So it can be, I'm sure it was an emotional experience. So thank you, Ivy. Alicia.
Yes, I wanted to add and show the vulnerable side for me. Since COVID started, it has been very tough for me emotionally, mentally, and honestly, I'm an immunologist. My specialty is infectious diseases in the lungs. So COVID really is right in my ballpark. So my professional life became very overloaded because I started to support Gallaudet with the public health and what decisions Gallaudet makes for keeping our community safe. And that amount of work really increased. But at the same time, as a person, I disclose that I do go through mental health issues. I go through anxiety, depression. And right before COVID, I ended a relationship, and then I bought a house and I moved in alone. And so in the middle of COVID, I felt like I lost all of my friends who I could reach out to, just give a hug, sit down and have coffee. And it jarred me. I tried to figure out and balance my mental health and my professional work, and that was very challenging. Like Rosavetta said with that wave, I kept falling in that water and I was trying not to drown. I think, like Rosavetta mentioned, COVID really allowed me to analyze myself. And I actually feel like I have become a stronger person because of it. I can be mentally aware and know that I can do these things alone. And I also have to learn how to ask for more help, because I, as a person, can be known as very independent. I don't need help and I can do it myself. But I stepped back and said, Nope. COVID said, you got to ask for help. And I said, I'm not asking for help. What am I doing right now? So it really felt like COVID had a lot of pros and a lot of cons. And at the end of the day, it has been a learning process for every single one of us.
Wow, you had mentioned, you felt that your workload had been overwhelming and, working at Gallaudet for the deaf community, I'm sure they expected you to have the resources because it is your expertise and your field. So that must have been very overwhelming, I can imagine. Thank you for sharing. And I know you've shared a dark and anxious journey, and I'm sure so many of us have gone through similar experiences, the anxiety, the depression, I mean, a list of things. So thank you for sharing, Alicia. Next, Brittany.
Yes. So I just graduated nursing school December of 2019. That is right before COVID hit. I passed my boards and then I got a job in February of 2020. And then March, everything really shut down in the United States. Nursing school did not prepare us for any type of pandemic. It didn't really impact me, but it was more of a shock factor, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do and learning a lot on the spot. My biggest issue was communicating with patients, and I could no longer read their lips with masks on. And that was very tough, very annoying. And this was before the clear masks really showed up and were effective. But before that, I was struggling and I was very frustrated. And I had to tell my coworkers to take over the patients because I couldn't risk myself and risk the patients in order to be able to read their lips. And so I would go into the room and my coworker would ask the questions, and I was very limited. And then the clear mask showed up and it changed everything for me. So I am very thankful for the people who created the FDA approved clear masks. It was very chaotic in my field, and my office was not hit by COVID. We did actually close for a few months and convert it to telehealth, so virtual health. So that reduced the risk for us, but you never know. Anybody could show up with symptoms of coronavirus. The best part of my work is that a lot of my coworkers learned sign because of me, because they wore regular masks. Since the clear masks were very limited, everybody was trying to get it for the deaf community, understandable, but at the same time, I needed it for me to communicate with my patients. And so the only ones who could use them were my patients and me. Sometimes my coworkers would put their mask down shortly and then converse with me, but they also learned how to sign, and not everybody has that opportunity. I actually know a deaf RN who lost their job because of coronavirus and the lack of communication, which should not be allowed. And we really needed to step up and support each other on that matter.
Wow, that's difficult. I've seen a lot of media sharing the pressures and of mental health and careers. So in your situation, you had mentioned that someone lost their job because they weren't able to communicate. And that is such a challenge, and you were able to get through this. So thank you. Thank you for your hard work and making sure to take care of the patients. So,
Thank you.
especially in your situation, being a hard hearing person and trying to communicate. So thank you. Next. Myra.
So I work as an ASL teacher, but I realized how students' home situations, I don't know a lot of my students' home situations. Being at home, I realized I have two nieces, and I have to have two separate desks, and they're both hearing, and I need to focus on my work, and I need them to be quiet, and I'm worried about them doing their work, and I'm worried about my students and whether my students are okay. And I know that my students come first, but then I forget about myself, and I work all day and all night, And then I forgot about myself, and I forgot about my, and I realized that my family is strong Mexican culture, and we don't show feelings. That's taboo. You just have to stay strong and you can do it. I also am very sensitive. And so I learned in America, being sensitive is okay and asking for help is okay. But the Mexican culture tells me no, that I'm not allowed to do that because that means something's wrong with me. So I had a lot of waves of emotion. And it told me to say, I'm exhausted. And I realized that my teaching style wasn't fun anymore. I'm normally very fun. And I could see that the students, for example, you could see the chat box and you could see that usually the students are always asking questions and trying to ask about how to do different things. And then all of a sudden things changed and you could see the dynamics and how things changed. And I realized that maybe my energy just kind of got depleted and I didn't have any energy yet. And I thought, I need to analyze myself. And I realized, am I depressed? Am I working too many hours day and night? Mentally, I'm exhausted. I haven't gone outside. Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm working all day, every day. And finally, my sister said, all right, let's go. And I'm not a morning person. She said, nope, let's go, get up. And we went out for a hike and I got that fresh breath of air and just realized I was so ready and so invigorated to teach those students. And I could feel that energy, but then I could feel the energy back from the students and I could see that energy was back. And I had put everybody else first, but then all of a sudden I forgot to say, what about me? And that's what COVID did for me. COVID really forced me to focus on myself, manage work, put boundaries up. And now I love hiking. I love that fresh air. It feels so good. And that is who I am. And that is really important to analyze that. And it's okay to be selfish for a bit. It is absolutely okay. I for a while thought that wasn't okay, but it is okay.
I see. It was, it's a very fast transition that we made to screens and continually being on meetings online. And, it's hard to be inventive, I think that was something that we were all able to understand. So thank you for sharing that. Next question. Oh, someone asked a question, and this is from the audience. Let's see. How has the organization been able to unpack the
cisgender normative privilege?
I see you're all thinking. Rosavetta, go ahead.
Honestly, I think a lot of us haven't really thought about it, to be honest. Again, this is something that is coming up more often, and we are becoming more aware of who individuals are and how you identify as with your sexual orientation and the respect that needs to be part of that. Now, as an organization, we have a responsibility to unpack our privilege. Absolutely. And that is something that I definitely need to bring back to the table. I believe that's something that we all individually need to do and then come together as an organization to figure something out. That's just my honest first response.
I agree. Thank you, Rosavetta. Mayra?
So we want to make sure that our space is safe. Trauma, having fear, and what has been popping up a lot is that we need to look at these things and realize that this is our chance to show our voice. And we have not been we need to make sure that we are no longer overlooked. And that's what I really want to throw out there.
Thank you. Thank you, Myra. Okay, so next question. I'm curious as how COVID has impacted deaf women differently. For example, the resources, different domestic violence resources. How has it differed? Ivy?
Like I've mentioned, I work in the human services field, and I think oftentimes a lot of the information about COVID was lost, and we would ask questions, and there was no resources, and there was no ASL actually being provided. A lot of English written articles, and they thought that that was enough for deaf people to understand. And it was really emphasized that things need to be communicated in ASL in many different signing styles, but it was important to have ASL to analyze that information and give that access of information. And there was no access from ASL to English is not helpful. And so a lot of the information that was received was based on assumptions. Facebook is something that I think was very dangerous. A lot of misinformation that was on there, and Facebook is delicious for gossip. But getting accurate information for COVID-19 is not where you should look at other pages and not Facebook. So I think that was just really lacking, and it was very sad. Communication was lacking.
Yeah, that's a pretty big difference compared to the hearing community having those resources, the ability to hear. With us as deaf women, it was completely gone. I mean, the access was not there. So do you think it made a difference in human services?
Absolutely. It was a lot of pay attention. And we were knocking on people's doors saying, we need this information. We need this information. Be patient. You'll get the information. And now we're banging on your door. The time is now. We need access to all information.
So was your wish granted?
A work in progress. I am staying positive.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Rosavetta.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with Ivy's comment. I felt like what the information we had was non-existent in the past, but I feel like COVID really forced a lot of groups, available information and resources from deaf therapists and deaf women's organizations. Typically, we would do just local information, but all of a sudden, all that information turned into vlogs and turned into everything that became available online. I will say one thing that we really lack is women who don't have access to the internet and women who don't have access to those types of resources. That is what still is lacking. But those who are privileged with that access, they now have that access. Can you imagine? It's been years and years trying to get information for us available online for domestic violence and mental health and all of these things. It took this to finally get this information up for us.
Yes, and I just wanted to add, you had mentioned about, the small community that did not have access to the internet. What ways are we able to reach out to those people?
So yes, there are ways through grassroots, family, friends. Those of us who are privileged, we have access to those people. We meet those people and we can connect with them. We can stop by. It's those types of things that can be done. And it is an obligation for the VRS industry and companies like Comcast and AT&T. They really should be providing access to those who don't have internet access for educational purposes, for communication access. And that's an essential That's essential. That's like food stamps. Everybody who's in a situation that needs that should be getting that.
Thank you. Thank you. Brittany.
So how I think it impacted women differently. I'm trying to visualize it, but as a person in the healthcare field, many people assumed that all nurses are female. So it's a little off point, but in regards to COVID and how it impacted, I think that we all have different experiences that many people lost their job. Some had to leave their job in hopes that they'll be able to go back at some point. There's many different situations. And I feel like men were preferred because they could manage things, and they say, well, women can't handle stress. I think that's something that came up a lot. And I think us as women, we need to step up and show that we can definitely do this, especially as a deaf person. Do not let others oppress us. We are very capable. And another reason is that we show that we can, but we can also become something in specific areas like the nursing field. And I feel like we have to work harder to show that we can do things, but the question is why, and it should be equivalent across the board.
So when coronavirus hit, did you feel as a deaf woman you were able to make a difference?
I felt like it helped me grow more. Looking
Thank you.
through over this time frame.
Thank you, Brittany. So I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm curious, what benefits do you have as a deaf woman in your different professions? Alicia?
Yes. So I think that with COVID and without COVID, seeing the amount of deaf women running organizations and setting up vlogs, live events, it was amazing to watch. We had a deaf woman in public health talking about what was going on with COVID and the ups and the downs and the vaccine and what does that mean. And that's from within our community. We have people like Ivy, who is a strong advocate for human services groups and making sure that women are paying attention. And I really love seeing all of the collaboration from everybody. It's as if we've never met before, and we are just collaborating and supporting each other, and we're advocating for each other. And a lot of times, a lot of us are typically in silos. So myself, I'm typically with science people, and HR people are with HR people, and artists are with artists, and teachers with teachers. But really, COVID forced all of us to make these unique bonds even more. And I feel like I have a different professional. I have a different role model. I am now have to be a role model to really show myself out there for youth, and the possibilities are endless for all of us.
Yes, I've noticed a variation of women coming from different backgrounds and areas, just all bringing it to the table and bringing it together. So thank you. Rosavetta.
Yes, I've always been a strong believer that it is very important to have a diverse workplace. Not only women, yes, yes, go women, but BIPOC, cisgender, transgender, we do contribute to the workplace in diverse ways, but also diverse perspectives, and making sure that everybody is included. And as a woman, I feel like as a leader, we have more of a nurturing, compassionate, empathetic feelings. But at the same time, we're more organized. I have to admit, we are more organized. I am biased, but I definitely feel like we are more organized and we get things done. So I can definitely agree with Alicia on this. COVID really helped us and forced us to want to reach out to other women and connect with other women. I think that's the wonderful thing about being in DWU and um, DWC. It really showed women out there to please reach out to us, show that your culture and embrace each other. And honestly, just yes, absolutely.
It's wonderful. I've noticed a lot of availability for different deaf women, including transgender women, being able to find resources through the different organizations here online and social media. Yeah. So thank you. Myra, you'd like to add something?
So currently on social media, we are recognizing a lot more women and their different work, their empowerment of themselves, and we're finally recognizing women that we have overlooked for so long. Not only that, is that we now have role models. These students can look up and go, oh, I can be a scientist, I can be a teacher, I can be a nurse, I can be a lawyer, I can be a gamer. There's all of these different things, except the only thing we can't do is just we can't hear. But now we are showing our children to the opportunity to look up at us and show that we can be leaders. And it's not just us as women. We show leadership as a mother, um, just as many different roles, you name it, and we show leadership. And now students and young kids have an opportunity to look up and say, oh, I can be like them. They get to watch videos of their teachers and see different types of ASL stories. And finally, there's a lot more access for these kids. I wasn't saying there was none back in the day, but there's a lot more now. And we have more recognition for BIPOCs. And it's not just giving jobs to friends that we know, but we are giving people of color the opportunity and the chance and being more conscious of what our actions are.
I agree. It really is ironic. I mean, obviously, I'm not the only one that feels that way. And the experience with coronavirus, where, we wish we'd had the opportunity and the accessibility to see our role models out there. I want to be like this person or that person. I imagine if I were younger, and I had that accessibility to all these role models, that would have been wonderful. So thank you, Myra. Brittany?
Want to make sure I pop up. Okay. I agree with absolutely everybody. I think that we are slowly changing the world for the future of women. As the future of women, we are showing who we are, and time will progress and show more. And as deaf women, we are showing to kids that all you need to do is you need to support each other. And I feel like I said that in a strange way, but you get my point. I think that we are going to change the world, and we're starting now. Why wait?
I agree. Since the pandemic arrived, there's been an increase on social media platforms with various resources and groups and information, entertainment, the content that we've witnessed. Now, when coronavirus has been dispelled, I mean, has been no longer a problem. We'll be able to reach out with each other and have more social interactions. So, Ivy.
Yes, I want to expand on what was mentioned. A lot of changes happened. Social media and um, you've seen a lot of things happen within the deaf community in regards to crab theory and things like that. No need to repeat that, but there's been a lot of chaos in the deaf community, and we've really called people out. And that's happened. And now women pop up, and there's still not enough. And what I will say is there are a lot of women that have been behind the scenes doing a lot of work. There's so many of us. And we've been here all along, and we've been leading all along. And now it's really come to the service. We've all been brought together. I don't need all kinds of, we're saving money. All I got to do is here we all are, all supporting each other, showing us how strong we are, and giving each other opportunities. We are all here, and the resources are out there, and it's unbelievable, and it's just amazing. You know, before find the resources, and now we're Googling it up.
It's very true. I feel that in person, you know, not being able to touch someone in person, we're touching our technology more. So thank you. We're going to move to the very last question. So your tips on self-care, what do you have to share? What do you feel that is important for self-care as a deaf woman out there?
I am a very, very stubborn person. I think about everybody else. We think about everything else. And then I had to tell myself, wait a second, I got very sick. And my partner looked at me and said, see, this is what happens. You've been taking care of everybody else, but you didn't worry about yourself. And I would work all day, and then at home I would still VP and continue to have these conversations with people all night. And I realized I need to listen to myself, open up your eyes and feel your body and be aware of how exhausted it might be. Somebody said, Myra said, you went hiking and you got that fresh air. And I, at this point, I forgot what air was like. I stayed inside all day long, on technology and on the phone nonstop. And that is exhausting. And I finally said, nope, I have to tell people I'm not available right now. I'll talk with you tomorrow. I'll talk with you later this week. So I think the important thing is listen to yourself.
It did force us to stay home and take care of ourselves. So thank you, Ivy.
Yes, got to pump the brakes.
And Alicia?
So I am a science teacher, so I have a little bit of biology behind this. But when I chatted with my students, I would always ask them, how are you doing? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. And I was getting some sideways or down, and a lot of them hadn't eaten or they weren't sleeping well. And I said to them, I said, there's a hormone and it's called cortisol. If you don't eat and you don't sleep, your cortisol levels will go up, which means that your function of your memory will go down. So the more stressed out you become, the more physical impact that it has on your body. So what Ivy said, pay attention to your bodies. And that's serious, because if you don't, you can become physically ill. You can get things like shingles or all different types of sicknesses. So I think it's really important to be aware of that. And for me, myself, I've learned with COVID that we are constantly on our phone. We are on Facebook and Instagram and all types of technology and FaceTime and Zoom. And at some point, you do need to disconnect from technology, because that technology and that glare on the eyes can impact your sleep, which means that you're no longer sleeping a full 8 hours, and that's decreasing, which means that your mental health is decreasing and declining. So that's very serious. Please take a moment and think about yourself. Now, for me, I found my hobby with plants. um, where I would buy plants and now I'm taking care of all of these plants. And I have a moment without technology where I just take a moment to enjoy green things, little baby sprouts. And that helped me release. And so I think that everybody needs to find that one thing where you can really just let go. And if you do something where your mind is constantly racing and you're thinking about things, that means you're not letting go enough. You need to actually let go. And you need a moment where you go, "Oh wow, time flew and I've just been focusing on something else." And that re-energizes you.
Yes, and I do feel that, spring, which is coming, and it communicates with us, and when you see green, you have something to take care of, and when you see it wilt, you realize that, it's almost as if your own self-care, you need to disconnect and take care of yourself. Rosavetta, you'd like to share something?
I'm excited that you talked about plants. I did something very similar, but I did want to say, first of all, I wanted to reinforce the plants. I take care of my plants every day. I talk to them every morning. I say, "Hi, good morning. How are you?" They look bright and happy. And you're right, you've got to talk to them. I don't want them to wilt. And so, very good tips. And also, know your limitation and be honest with yourself. I think one of the biggest self care issues is, can I do this? Do I have enough bandwidth to take on this piece of responsibility? Do I have enough bandwidth to commit to a project fully? And if you don't, it's okay to say no. You prioritize yourself first. The second thing I wanted to mention, it's kind of hard because, well, when you commit to a project and you say no, a lot of people will get what's called imposter syndrome. And I had a moment of just depression. I got promoted. I had amazing opportunities, but why did I feel this way? And I started to put down a list of all of my accomplishments thus far since I was a kid. And that is always on my desk. And I look at that whenever I'm having a moment of despair and I feel like I'm having imposter syndrome, like I haven't accomplished enough and I haven't done enough. I look at this list and I look and I say, no, I've done enough and I am enough and I've accomplished enough. And so I really correlate that with being honest with yourself. If you say no to a project, that's okay. So self care is very important.
Thank you for sharing that about imposter syndrome. It's a new term for me. So, yeah, that's a great tip. I definitely will be sure to take a note. I think it's a great tip, and I will try to do that once I hit my imposter syndrome. So, thank you. Brittany.
I completely agree with everybody and everybody's comments about self care. I would say for those who are planning to go to school, who are already in school, please take care of yourself. I learned my lesson in nursing school. I ate junk food. I studied overnight. I worked full time as well. So I worked full time during the day, school at night, clinicals on weekends. And I didn't give myself any time, any break, and I was constantly studying or doing something. And I buried my head in the book. I didn't give my husband any attention. I didn't give any of my friends any attention. And it felt like I almost lost them, but they were very, very supportive. And it's important to make sure that you have that support system because without that, you might actually feel completely overloaded and stressed. So pay attention, know your body, have fun, give yourself some breaks. I think that is very important. And yeah.
Wow, right. You said, being in school and working full time. I'm curious, that break, what would that look like? Is it a long break? I mean, time's tight. You don't have enough time to actually take a so-called break, but if you found the time to take a break, What did that look like?
Honestly, I didn't really have a break. For example, I worked at that time, I think I worked 7 to 4:30, and then class started at 5 o'clock. And then I would eat in the car, drive to school, have the classes from 5 to 11, and a 45-minute drive home, and trying to study at some time. I look back and I don't even know how I did it, and how I actually lived through this. It was very tough, but I made it. And sometimes you do have to sacrifice some things to get through it. And look at where I am now, and that's what I need to focus on. But at the same time, I do look back and I realize I should have done this and I should have done that. If I go back to school again, I know how to balance it.
I think it's important to have, that basic foundation, eating well, drinking enough water, sleeping well. So thank you. Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Oh, and yeah, and laughter too.
Yes, lots of
Thank
that.
you, Brittany. Myra.
Um, Rosavetta is absolutely right. I have a very hard time saying no. I learned that, and I realized that time and patience and adjusting my schedule. And again, I would tell myself, wait a second, I need to go outside. I need to have some fresh air. I have a bicycle that I just haven't used. And I finally took it out and was riding my bike and realized I was out of shape, and realized that I'd spent too much time on work and things at home. And so what I had done is I looked at my schedule and I found breaks for myself. And during those breaks, I would go to the lake and go swimming, or go hiking or go biking or something, and find that time for yourself. And sometimes taking your breaks inside doesn't help. And I'm not a huge fan of flowers, to be honest with you. I like the fake plants, I really do. But I realize that I like plants and I like flowers and I like hiking, and I would walk and go, "Oh, what is that smell?" And I would smell the flower and I thought it was so pretty. And these were all new things to me. Before, I didn't pay attention to those things. I was either focused on work or with friends, and bringing myself out to Mother Nature and hiking and doing these different things. Gyms shut down. So instead, where'd you go? You went hiking. And I didn't even realize that around my area there was so much nature and so much outdoor spaces that I could go to, and I could just have time for myself. And actually, one of my favorite things was watching the sunset alone. And it would get dark. I would get a little scared, and then go home. But the point is, I felt good about myself, and I was able to go to bed happy and smiling. And it's important to have those meditative moments for yourself and focus on yourself. And I found things that I really liked. And in a lot of ways, I got to say, thanks, COVID. I found time for myself and new things that I enjoyed.
So one of your tips and your advice on self-care was trying to do something new. You're not crazy about maybe plants, but you found a way to get outside. So those are really nice tips. Try something new. Instead of the same old, get out. Yeah, search for something new. And maybe you wouldn't have to be out. You could find something to do at home, whatever your imagination brings you, drawing, exercising. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that information. Great.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are done with the panel's questions, and I just want to thank everyone on the panel for answering each question. And I'm curious if anyone has any questions from the audience, if they'd like to share those with the panelists. Okay, so we do have a question. And that question is tips for deaf women to empower each other. Rosavetta.
I love that question. I am actually a big believer in Michelle Obama's quote, When you make it through that door, you are completely responsible to leave that door open to
Mhm.
allow everybody else to have that same opportunity. And I see a lot of deaf women don't have the capability to really say, hey, I need that help. And it is also our job to see those potentials and identify um, young leaders and offer yourself and your experience and your expertise and allow the youth to take it and empower other women to say, I can do this. And having that unwavering support with no expectations back on that. I have offered you all of the support. I don't need anything back, but I'm giving you the resources. And that is one big tip I have. Leave the door open.
I like that. I love that you shared that from Michelle Obama. It really is important to keep that door open for the rest of us, because most of us, as deaf women, we tend to, you know, if there's an opportunity, we'll share it. And, if I see you going through that door and you're leaving it open for the rest to follow. So that's great. Thank you. Myra?
So I really notice that a lot of women will look at each other and say, oh, I'm better than you, or I'm better than you. Guess what? All we have is each other. Respect each other, understand each other, have empathy, have compassion, empower each other and encourage each other. Supporting, we don't know what type of situations happen at home. I think the most important thing is to teach each other and support each other, because we are women. We need to uplift each other and unify with each other. There's being better than each other. What's the point of trying to do that? If you work really, really, really hard and you become a better person and you become what you really want, that's your goal. And you have to work really hard to that. And it's not easy. And we need to empower and help each other. Sometimes somebody's going through a really hard time, and you empower them and you give them that strength that they need to move on. And that's what we need to do as women.
You're absolutely right about advocating for others, and seeing someone else's growth is important for yourself and watching that in others. So thank you. Ivy. Hold on one sec.
1 second.
Ivy. Here we go. All right.
Wonderful. So I think that one of the different ways to empower each other, Alyssa and I, we set up the Velez Sisters show. And the reason why is that we want to be role models for deaf young women to look up to. And we have different stories. Some are funny, some are culturally sensitive. They embrace their culture, and we don't preach. We show different ways to embrace yourselves and be more creative, and whether we can empower people through theater or all different types of ways. We want to empower each other and uplift each other.
Yes, entertainment always is inspiring to me. If I see something, a funny story that inspires me, or the creativity that I witness, and feeling that I can do that too, it really is wonderful. Thank you. Alicia.
For me, I was planning to say something very similar to what Myra said. This is not a competition. And I think that we often forget that because we want to be successful. But again, this is not a competition. And I think it's really important to remember what the bigger goal is of why we're all doing this. We care about our community, and the privileged atomic hands for STEM, we've been talking about how do we empower others, not just women, but anybody who's interested in learning how to communicate with science or communication science. And we've really found that the resources we have, like light, tripods, cameras, green screens. Other people might not have access to those types of things, but we can empower them. How do we do that? We provide that through our nonprofit, meaning a person wants to vlog and they need that support. We can do this, this, and this, and we'll mentor you. You want feedback on how to communicate science terms? We will absolutely support you on that. And one of the things that we discussed is I feel like growing up in a hearing mainstream world, I had a lot to prove, but it's not about that at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's about our future generation, K through 12, who could become the future X, Y, and Z, whatever they want. Everyone, not just, this is for everybody, not just women. And we need to provide more than just signed support. But what else are those youth lacking? We need to provide those things.
That's a huge way to support, checking in and providing what's really necessary to help them grow. That's big. I love that. Thank you. Brittany.
Yes, I think that we empowered women here and there, but we need to support each other by guiding people to the right situations and right needs. For example, if somebody needs more resources, we give them the advantage and we show them how to thrive and we show them how to be successful. And I agree with what everybody has said. Yep. Absolutely.
Providing tools. Alicia?
I wanted to add one more thing. One thing that I really noticed is I find it really cool to, for people that I have met who want to improve or need something, if I know anybody who has those resources, I connect those people together. If one person feels like, oh gosh, I'm new to Chicago, I don't have any friends, and I've got friends in Chicago, well, what's stopping me from linking this new person to my friend? Maybe I need a therapist. Well, maybe I'll reach out to Ivy. If they're in Massachusetts, wonderful. I'll reach out to Ivy for the right resources. And so I feel like we all know a lot of people in our community, and we need to take opportunities and take opportunity and network with each other.
Agreed. I mean, here we are meeting some new friends and making new friends, and so we can make those connections. So thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Rosavetta.
I really want to, oh, here I'm spotlighted. Okay.
Yes,
I want to make sure that youth or anyone who want to know more about deaf women and spotlighted women, please look at the Deaf Women United page. There's a lot of history on there of deaf women. The panelists are on there. And I'm sure that DWC has their page as well that spotlights a lot of people. And I think that it will be inspiring for us to look at that and say, yes, we can. And I think that that's one tip I wanted to throw out there as well.
Yes. Thank you. Brittany.
I wanted to add those who want to be involved in the medical field or know that they might benefit from this, please reach out to me, DeafMD, on Facebook and Instagram. Reach out to me. I want to be a wonderful support system.
What a great example of empowering deaf women. Thank you so much, Brittany. Oh, one more.
Yeah, can I add something?
One more. Myra wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, or I just wanted to say for the youth, we're not empowering just strong women. or I'm sorry, these women are not just strong. We cry, we are emotional, we overthink things, and we sometimes have our moments that we're not strong, and that is okay to have those moments to cry. And that's what makes you become a better person.
Yes. Thank you. So as the moderator, Arlene, I just wanted to mention, find your love for others inside yourself. Love other deaf women, whoever they are. If you don't know them or you do know them, love them, empower, share what you know. As Alicia said, make those connections and support each other. You can show love through entertainment. So thank you all for being involved. I really appreciate you watching us today. Thank you again.
I always say that when we have a bunch of women get together, we have that energy and that magic. And tonight, you were all on Zoom. I felt very just touched with your stories and your advice. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Arlene, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Of you for just opening up and putting it out there. And it was absolutely beautiful. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for watching, everybody.